to have all the same information that everyone else. So everyone else has. So it is now, the recording has started. So with that, I want to welcome everyone. I'll introduce myself first, and then I will turn it over to our colleagues from Sooke to give a bit of more information about the opportunity that they have posted here. And then really the thrust of the meeting is an opportunity for all of you to ask questions about this opportunity. And then we will wrap up after that. So I'm Lisa Helps. I'm the executive lead for BC Build's project origination. And we're here today because the District of Sooke has put forward an opportunity for the development community to create housing and a health clinic on a site in their downtown. And they'll tell you more about that in a moment. I'm going to tell you first a little bit about the process that we're in, how it works, and where we go from here. I'd like to just invite everybody to mute. I note that there are some people who are not muted, and a lot of people in the meeting, so it could end up with quite a bit of background noise. So I'm going to share my screen here and let you know where we are in the process, and then where we go from here. As soon as I can get this little thing here to disappear. Oh man, I need a new approach to Teams. Maybe this will trick it. Just give me 1 second here. All right, here we are. So I'm just going to walk you right down to the bottom of this page that you've already probably all seen, which is how you got to this information session today, to let you know where we are in the process. So the zone land has been posted on the site, and that's why we're here. You will submit proposals for this opportunity by July the 29th. That's when they're due. At that time, a joint evaluation committee made up of members from the BC Builds team and members from the District of Sooke will co-evaluate the proposals based on criteria, which I'll show you in a minute, which maybe you've looked at already. That we don't know how long that evaluation process will take because we don't know how many applications we'll get in, and this is the first time we've been through this process. But we would aim to have the evaluations turned around in a month, and at that point we would let everyone know, including the unsuccessful proponents as well as the successful proponent, know who had been selected. At that point, and this is where it's important, and we kind of move into the BC Build's need for speed approach. We would sign a conditional land contribution letter between the district, the successful proponent, and BC Builds, and in that letter, that agreement would lay out what each of us is meant to do over the next 12 to 18 months in order to get this project to construction. I think someone's just joined who's not muted. If you could mute yourself, that would be great. Thank you. And in that year to 18-month period, BC Builds would consider the funding and financing elements. The district would consider the regulatory approvals and expediting through development permit, building permit, subdivision, and anything else that needs to happen. And of course, the landowner would work to put, or the successful proponent would work with the landowner and BC Builds to get everything in place to get to construction. And really, that's the ambition with BC Builds, is to get these projects, because they're pre-zoned, because that risk is gone, to get the projects from concept to construction within 12 to 18 months. And there are some out clauses for all parties along the way. So that's the process. And then I just want to, I'm not going to walk you through Sooke's property opportunity notice. I really want to commend them on it, though. They've cast a very wide net. They have left the door open to private or public, nonprofit. So there's I think a good opportunity here. They'll walk through in a moment a bit more detail that they'd like to share with their site, but I just wanted to scroll down to make sure we're all clear on the evaluation criteria. So you can see these are the mandatory requirements, and each of these eligible applicant meeting the target household incomes, demonstrated property management experience, and demonstrated development experience. These are basically qualifying criteria, and they're laid out in more detail in this document. So these aren't going to be scored. These are, we answer yes or no. Are they eligible? Are they meeting the target household incomes, et cetera? If the answer is yes, and again, these are all spelled out really clearly, then we go into the evaluation criteria and the weighting. So really, financial viability and sustainability gets the highest number of points. BC Builds is a rental supply program. There are some units that are below market, but it's not an ongoing operating subsidy. It's not an affordable housing program per se. It's really targeted at middle income households. There are points for the amount of per unit subsidy required. The less per unit subsidy, the better. This one is interesting because the per unit subsidy, the grant funding is only available to nonprofits, co-ops, or First Nations development corps. So that's not private companies aren't eligible for that. Percentage of household incomes at 20% below market. So that is our target. We want to have at least 20% of units below market. You do your best, and that will be evaluated. Target household incomes, again, how closely are you hitting, and how how well can you do in terms of targeting the household incomes of middle income folks? And then speed to market is also critical with 15% weighting. So I just wanted to highlight the ones that are getting the higher scores. The lower scores are there, and you can read them and do your best. So that's all from me. Just really wanted to outline where we are in the process, how it works, what the criteria is. All of this is up on the website, and really encourage you not only to read the property opportunity notice, but please read, and it's flagged about 3 times in the property opportunity notice, the BC Builds program framework, because that's the document that our decision-making authorities will refer to when they're evaluating these projects for financing and funding. And with that, I am going to turn it over. I know there are a number of folks here from the District of Sooke. So Rachel, who's going to be the lead on sharing just a high level of what Sooke is looking for? Would that be you?
Yeah, I can just do a very brief overview and then hand it over to, and I'm not sure who's speaking from Searchin, if it's Annemieke or Mary or Rick here, but unfortunately our planner Tara is, Miss Johnson's off sick today, so I'm not a planner. I'm not going to pretend I'm a planner, but I believe most of the information that would be relevant to the developers on the call have been included in the property opportunity notice. The land is raw land. It is serviceable. It is not currently serviced with sewer, but it is able to be serviced and connected. I don't know if it was highlighted in the attachments, but as far as hydro servicing, it was oversized when the library was built a couple years ago. So I know it was built for potential future capacity there from the hydro aspect. I don't believe there's any significant changes between, we have a current OCP from 2010. We also have a draft OCP underway. But there wouldn't be any material changes with a new OCP if that happened to be adopted before this bill, as this build was being worked on. It's a CD zone, raw land, 6 stories is currently permitted, up to 6 stories of housing is permitted on the site with density bonusing. And maybe I'll just leave that there and I can hand it over to Searchin, who can speak to the health center aspect, which is the critical aspect of this project. This has been a priority for council and the community to have this health center as this Lot A right in the town core community hub.
Okay, so let's hear a little bit about the health center, and then it'll be an opportunity for everyone here to ask questions of Sooke.
Sure. It's my name is Annemieke Holthuis, and I'm the president of the Sooke Region Communities Health Network. I'm working with a project team of Mary Dunn, Rick Robinson, and Jamal Mustafi, and we've been working with the Ministry of Health since at least 2022, and the ministry approved the proposal that we had submitted for a community health center with an urgent primary care center. As you'll see in the property notice, there is about 15,000 square feet of the community health center, which may expand to up to 20,000 square feet. But we're still working with the ministry in terms of getting the actual, the final staff allocation and the funding requirements, which obviously generate staff space allocation. And we are, as I said, working with them to finalize all of those numbers. It'll be a community health center, urgent primary care center, and then there will be a co-location possibilities with a number of different partners we've identified. But that obviously will, those partners will be dealing with whoever takes advantage of the development opportunity. So it's going to be an urgent primary care center and community health center, which will take an established medical clinic here in Sooke to form the basis of that with additional healthcare providers. It's an exciting opportunity for us as Surgeon and for the community to have healthcare services in one location, and also obviously for residents who would be living in the residential buildings above. So it's to be kind of a hub for the community in terms, because on Lot A, there's already a library there, and then it would be the community health center, and there's a proposal for some other affordable housing in that similar lot. So it's quite an exciting area for us. As I said, we are keen to form part of this BC Builds, and we'll give you some more information in terms of specific questions. But maybe I'll just leave it right there.
Thank you very much. Before I turn to the group, just want to clarify, the province is providing capital and operating funding for the community health center and the primary care center. Is that correct?
Yes, they're providing capital funding in terms of leasehold improvements. And then they're also providing operational funding for that. Yes.
Okay. Thank you very much. All right, it's now open to questions, and please use this opportunity to ask anything you need to in order to help put together a good proposal for this this opportunity. So you can put questions in the chat if you're not feeling comfortable talking in front of folks, or you can put up your hand and ask questions into the room.
Hi, Lisa. Just before we get going, I'm wondering if you want to stop sharing the screen just so we can see everyone.
I do. Thank you. I'd forgotten that I was still sharing. Thanks, Alistair.
Perfect.
Yeah, Jesse, go ahead, and then Robert.
Thank you. Just about the capital costs for the leasehold improvements, is that intended to be the TI costs? And then the gray shell would be captured within the financing of the project through BC Builds, kind of fitting that 30% threshold.
Annemieke, I'll turn to you first to answer your portion of the question, and then, yeah, go ahead.
Yes, for the community health center portion, that's it. We would be, the province, the Ministry of Health funding would come to deal with the leasehold improvements, but the shell would be within this project.
Yeah, 100% financed, but then the carrying costs serviced by the operating funding coming from the province into the project.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Robert, go ahead.
Yeah, I had the same question, and so maybe just following up on that, is it envisaged that the health center component would be a separate, like, airspace parcel or something that would be then owned by the health authority or Sooke? Has that been thought through yet? As far as the end, at the completion of the project, who's going to own that space?
I think we're open to possibilities. It is unlikely that the Sooke Region Communities Health Network would be owning the space, but you know, we're open to discussions in terms of possibilities. I don't know if Rick or Mary want to say anything more.
I can maybe interject just from the district perspective, because the district is the landowner right now. So that's something that we can We're open for conversation on this. Like, we know that this is a challenging build. Like, the council has been trying to get this built for a decade now. So having this committed funding from the province to build the inside of the tenant improvements for this health center, you know, we appreciate the district's going to have to do something more potentially. So we're open for ideas and suggestions on the best model to have this be sustainable going forward for everybody involved, for sure.
Okay.
If that answers your question.
It does, yeah. No,
Okay.
that's great. And just a quick follow-up more on the health center side. Has there been any kind of thought or around parking requirements and both for the health center and the residential? Is parking thought to be at grade, or is it going to be underground? And if so, what are the parking requirements for the health center? Has anyone thought about that yet?
I believe, so I can interject a bit. I know there was talk about underground. It depends on how high the building is.
Yeah.
I think with the housing piece is what I recall from other meetings, because this has been obviously a conversation going on for many years. So I know that was a conversation about the parking was, does it need to be underground? How many floors of housing do you have? Is this going to potentially be a parking variance question? Because you need X for sure for the health center. And then the rental piece or the housing piece on top is definitely been a topic of conversation of how much square footage is available to do parking, and it at some point underground would be potentially required. And so what does that look like from a parking variance perspective, I think is the last I had heard about the parking.
And I guess I'll just ask as a follow-up, is the district willing to be flexible with parking to accommodate housing and the health center on this site? Like, would the district be open to receiving a parking variance application as please do not make a parking variance application when you're submitting your proposal, but you know, if you are the successful applicant, would the district consider a parking variance, working with the applicant to make parking work on the site for all the needs?
For sure. Like, again, the bonus of this site being in the downtown core, right close to the bus route, you know, makes it a little easier to digest something like that for council. And again, I know they're supportive of this project, and we've had to do parking variances on other projects. You know, the two other affordable housing projects that have just completed on Drennan and Charters, I believe it's the Drennan one for sure had a parking variance there. So I definitely not a non-starter for this project.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions? Robert, back to you. Yeah, use the time. This is your time. Yeah, we want to make sure everything is aired. Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, so those are a couple of questions on the health center side. I guess on the BC Build side, so I've got really three questions. One is, you know, I am aware of the target for affordability of 20% of the homes at 20% below market. If a group was interested in delivering deeper affordability, so more affordability than that kind of benchmark, and we're able to attract grant funding or some kind of funding to pay for that, would that be, I'm just trying to confirm if that piece would be considered separate from BC Builds. So if we go and find grant funding from CMHC, for example, the only way that grant money being able to deliver more affordability would be to have it not be taken out of BC Build's contribution, if you follow that.
Great. I sure do. Yeah, great question. A lot of the projects we're working on right now are looking to stack with what used to be called COI, but which is now the Affordable Housing Fund. Absolutely fine. Basically, our BC Build's equity that comes into projects on a grant basis is meant to, for nonprofits, co-ops, First Nations, buy down 20% of the units to 20% below market. So that's how we would calculate the grant contribution to a project. What is market and what is what's the equity gap if we want to drop 20% of the units to 20% below, and then that per unit amount, that equity gap would be determined by how much does it cost to get 20% of the units to 20% below, and then we would divide that across all of the units in the building. And I think that's really important to recognize. So say you're building a 100-unit building and you want to get 20% of the units to 20% below, you'd figure out what is the equity gap. Say it's $137,000 per unit. That $137,000 per unit applies to the 100 units, not just the 20. So that's important for everyone to know when you're building your pro formas for this project. And then to just reaffirm, if you're proposing to bring other funding in, other financing in that can get you lower than that, that's fine. It's just BC Build's money can't be used to buy any deeper affordability than 20% at 20%.
That's great. Thanks for clarifying that. And so I think you answered this question, but so BC Build is open to the project being financed through CMHC as opposed to through BC Build's financing. Is that correct?
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the things, and it says it somewhere on the general website, we have a partnership with the federal government where we have a $2 billion set aside from the apartment construction loan program. So we can, we're still negotiating the final terms of the agreement, but BC Builds will have the ability to prioritize projects into that, the ACLP program. So rather than going into the general pool and competing with projects across Canada, we've got $2 billion worth of set aside where we can basically prioritize projects for the federal government and say, here's a project, and then it goes into the ACLP stream as long as it meets the minimum criteria. So, and that's actually better for everyone because it's a longer amortization period. It makes our equity go further on projects. Yeah. So yeah, absolutely. We can provide grants where CMHC can provide the financing. So those kinds of partnerships are good.
Great, thank you. And then just one last question around obviously any affordability commitments would be presumably documented in a housing agreement and any other and covenants that BC Builds need. Is BC Builds envisaging that these projects would have operating agreements as well, or is it going to be secured just with the covenants?
There will be, we haven't finalized the terms yet. There will be a very light touch operating agreement. One of the pushbacks we've had from this, I don't know if pushbacks is a noun, I just used it as one, but one of the things we've heard from the sector is there's a dissatisfaction sometimes with operating agreements because they're can be overly restrictive. And so we're working to make, and overly restrictive in not allowing nonprofits to re-leverage the buildings to invest in more affordable housing down the road. And so we're crafting an operating agreement that gets rid of some of those restrictions. But there will be a very light touch operating agreement that has just, basic things in it. But yeah, Section 219 covenant. And just this is, I think, important for everyone. In addition to some relief maybe for the District of Sooke, we are creating template lease agreements and template housing agreements with CMHC so that we're happy with them. CMHC is happy with them if you're going for CMHC financing, and it's a heck of a lot less work for the district to start from scratch negotiating a lease with whoever the successful proponent is. So we've got some of those templates just about finished as well.
That's great. Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, I'm going to go to Jesse and then to Malcolm.
Thank you. I see that the residential component, there is in the CD15 zone an 8% requirement for amenity area. That's typically a higher percentage. And when looking at the 15 to 20,000 square feet for the community health center, I wonder if the amenity is going to be calculated within that 30% maximums that BC Housing typically has for non-residential. Is the residential amenity going to compete or be part of that 30% calculation?
It would be part of that calculation. It's space, whether you're talking about the residential amenity spaces of use for the residents.
Yeah.
Yeah, I actually don't know for certain, but I think in most projects like that, if anyone else has better information, but it's residential amenity space, it would be considered the residential portion of the building.
Oh, okay. So it would not be within that 30% formula for determining maximum costs or size, proportional size for non-residential.
So I want to make sure I understand. Is the so let's just make it really practical. There's a community room or a rooftop deck on floor 3 for the residents. That is included as part of the residential space. It doesn't cut into the non-residential.
Okay.
I think so.
Okay, thank you. That was helpful. Malcolm, go ahead.
Yeah, hi, good morning, everyone. Some familiar faces. Just a couple questions. One is on the BC housing financing. Is there now takeout available to private developers? In the past, BC Housing has not been able to do takeout financing to anybody other than nonprofits. Has that changed?
No, we're still working on that.
Okay, that's pretty limiting then for the private sector.
Except that we can put you through the ACLP stream to the Government of Canada.
Yeah. Okay. Just it's nice when you're getting into a project to know how you're getting out of a project. So that's a pretty significant piece on our end in terms of how we look at it. I guess the other question I have is around timelines. You've got some pretty aggressive timelines, and I have quite a bit of experience in the last couple of years working in Sooke, and they have been severely challenged with staffing issues. And I just know from like our side with getting a design team to actually put a design in, get it to a point where it can get submitted and get it back through the process, because this being in the town center DP area, it has to go to council. It's not a delegated DP. And my experience is that takes well over 12 months. And then if you have to make a change to something, it's got to go back through council again. So I'm just wondering, like, if I'm putting together a proposal, should I just tell you what you want to hear, or should I actually give you what the reality is of working in the jurisdiction? Because I do have some firsthand knowledge of how it works out there, and I'm not the only one. There's other groups out there that have experienced the same thing, and a lot of it is to do with their staffing, which you know, is an ongoing issue. So it hasn't been solved yet. So just thoughts on how to approach that.
Well, I'm going to let the city manager respond first, and then I'll jump in after that. Rachel, go ahead.
Sure. You know, fair points Mr. McNaughton's making. I think our community is not unique from any other community that struggles with planning staff right now, engineering staff, any staff. However, this has been a priority project. Council has directed staff to make this a priority. So if there's a successful developer that is entered into an agreement with the district for this project, that will be bumping up the list of priorities of which projects get looked at. You know, as in a perfect world, I would love to be able to get everyone's files the next day, but that's just not the reality we're in. So we're doing the best we can with the resources we have. But however, for this project, it's been deemed by council, directed by council for staff to make this a top priority project for the district. And if there's information that needs to be presented to council, we've agreed to do our best to hit the targets, the 12 to 18 month target through the BC Builds project, and keep everyone informed along the way of any potential delays or what's happening. I can't predict, obviously, how comprehensive the changes potentially could be that council would need to see, but I know this is a top priority project for the district, so we will do our best to hit those timelines with the staffing resources we need and go from there.
Thanks, Rachel. And I just want to share that the District of Sooke isn't alone on this. We're there with BC Builds, and this is, the typical process up here, how long it usually takes, right? 3 to 5 years. The way that we're running BC Builds is once that conditional land contribution letter is signed, we've got everything in, and we create a project team that's led by BC Builds, meets every 2 to 3 weeks or whatever cadence is necessary. As obstacles come up, the obstacles get removed, and we're doing this on all of our existing projects. And we're the program's brand new, but we're well positioned to hit this 12 to 18 month timeline by working together in a different way. So it's not all on the district, and BC Builds would provide some support along the way as well. Other questions? Oh, sorry, Malcolm, back to you.
If I could maybe just follow up. I appreciate all of that, and thank you. I just, my question really is around how is this getting reviewed? I've been on the end of reviewing BC housing projects, and there's always a, like I say, is it based on reality, or are we getting scored on what you want to hear? Because the reality from my standpoint, and I'll just put it out there, is 4 to 6 months for my design team to actually get a design into the district. Even if the district can review it in 6 months and get it approved, and then I've got to go into building permit after that, that's a realistic another 4 to 6 months, and then the district has to approve the building permit. So unless we're compressing all of this into doing a building permit design with a DP, that has to go to council, which is a huge amount of risk. I'm just wondering, how do you do that, and how is it going to be scored when you start giving these timeframes?
Well, I think what we're looking for in proposals that are going to come forward is you propose to us, what would it take to hit this 12 to 18 month timeline? What are your creative ideas? Jesse, you're smiling. I think what I hear from the district and the reason that they've put this site forward, they've been working on this project for a decade. I think there is some urgency from the Ministry of Health. This funding is not going to hang around forever. So I think we've given the best answer we can to that question. But please don't tell us just what we want to hear. Please put forward proposals that are based on, how you think you can meet timelines that we're setting. I should say one more thing. It wasn't a question, but if you read through the program framework, you'll see it there. Malcolm talked about, reviewing BC housing buildings, et cetera. Just for clarity, BC Builds is just built to the BC building code, not to BC housing design guidelines. So just for clarity, when you're thinking about costing your projects and so on, building code compliance. Jesse, go ahead.
Thank you. Regarding ACLP, do you know if the province is going to administer within that 2 billion, or if CMLS is still going to be kind of the third-party administrator?
CMLS will still be the third-party administrator, but what we're trying to do is really what we are doing is working to really align processes to avoid duplication as much as possible. But yes, CMLS will still underwrite the projects. We'll underwrite them for the grants, but they'll do the underwriting for the financing.
And are they willing to provide commitments early so that it is known? Our understanding and experience has been the project has to be really shovel ready, either within 6 months of construction starting or construction having already started before their commitment actually is solidified. So I think the application will assume that the takeout will land, but it is something that we're constantly kind of running into as a barrier.
Yeah, it's a great question. So what we're working on with CMHC and the ACLP program and I'm going to spell out things in full words, not use BC Housing's acronyms, but kind of a gated approval process. So for BC Builds to confirm provisional project approval, which is where we notionally set aside the funding and financing, a project needs to be at 50% design and a Class C estimate. So we would get the project through on that basis. We would bring it to our approval authorities, assuming no CMHC. So the project has to work with just BC Builds alone. But we would show the second scenario, and here's the scenario with ACLP coming in. Once we get through the provisional project approval process, CMHC would then step in, and their letter of intent comes at 90% design and a Class C estimate. Our PPA would give them our provisional project approval would give them comfort on, if we're in, so they're in, and then we would do the final project approval at BC Housing or BC Builds, and the commitment from CMHC close to the same time. So we're working very closely together. There are some instances where we may it may make sense, but actually we're just talking about this specific instance. Never mind. This isn't a general BC Builds talk, so let's talk about this one. I think it would be PPA, ACLP, LOI, and then FPA and commitment letter at the same time.
Perfect. Thank you.
You're welcome. Is there any? Yeah, Malcolm, back to you.
Hi, sorry, I just catching up on a few things here. It's been a while since I've worked on some BC housing projects. So what are the dollar values now where a project has to go to Treasury Board and to the BC Housing Board of Commissioners?
So below 20 million is approved at executive committee. Above, so at 25 million, it's approved by the board. 25 million to 100 million, it can be approved by the Ministry of Housing, and above 100 million, it needs to go to Treasury Board. And this is definitely not an above $100 million project unless there's something that's way out of whack. So it would be an internal approval between BC Builds and BC Housing and the ministry. If it's deemed high risk, then it would, ministry can shuffle it over to Treasury Board staff. But we're aiming to bring low risk projects through BC Builds so that they stay within the Ministry of Housing's approval authority.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Want to invite anyone who hasn't asked a question who might want some more information on this opportunity to feel free to do so. Okay, that was a requisite 17 seconds of awkward silence, which may mean that it is time to wrap up the meeting. A couple of notes for all of you. First of all, thank you for coming and thanks for your interest in this opportunity. Secondly, everything you should need to submit a proposal because of the work that Sooke has done should be in that property opportunity notice. If there's anything that's not there, that's missing information, please write, and Alistair, I think, has put the email in the chat to info@bcbuildshomes.ca. If we receive questions that have been already covered in this info session, we'll probably just direct back to this. But if there's something that's not in the property opportunity notice and not been covered today, we would update the property opportunity notice so that everyone has the answer to the question that's been asked, because we're running a fair and transparent process. Please do not contact the District of Sooke directly. Everything needs to come through info@bcbuildshomes. And please have your proposals into that info@bcbuildshomes.ca address we didn't put a time, so it could be up to midnight on July 29th. We hope you're not up that late. But thank you for your interest. I think this is a really good opportunity, and look forward to receiving your proposals. And with that, oh, Robert, one more question? No? All right. Thumbs up. Okay, thanks everyone. Have a good afternoon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mm.